Speaker Paul Ryan was correct when he said that Trump heard something that the rest of us didn't hear.
I think some of us heard it, and some of the people that did hear it were in Trump's campaign. And what it was they had been saying very early on in their campaign, really taking the Brexit-style mantra. And he used to say, I'm Mr. Brexit, Brexit plus 10. And what they meant by that was among rural areas of America, among areas of America that has really felt this job movement away, the closing down of manufacturing, factories moving out, and even in agrarian, people who traditionally have their jobs in farming, around that they had seen this surge, not just in an anti-Hillary movement, but in a pro-Trump movement, that's where his voice was being heard. Now, we should be clear, Trump's own data team actually projected him losing this race in almost 93 out of 100 scenarios they were losing, but they did see this surge toward him among these communities so affected by some of the economic issues we've been discussing.
And how his rhetoric then was really tapping into that anger. What about the fact, though, that if turnout had been even a few percentage points greater in certain key demographics, we might be looking at a whole different scenario right now?
Bonnie, that's exactly the scenario we're looking at. Had Hillary Clinton been able to turn out, particularly in African-American communities, and a much higher Latino vote, she would have been president. And which is, I think, so interesting is we saw in some states, we did see a Latino surge. We saw it in Nevada, we saw it in parts of Florida, but we didn't see it across Florida that she needed to get it. And she didn't turn out the African-American voter, even and to the point she needed in Philadelphia, in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in Madison, in areas that she really needs to carry those states. And among that upper Rust Belt in particular, it could have made the difference. It would have made the difference for her.
Megyn, why didn't she get it?
She ran a bad campaign, Mark, and I think that's an issue that they're going to have an autopsy for and sort of look at what their messaging was. This is what I find so fascinating about this is they couldn't have had a clearer steering from the electorate that this was a year of more radical politics on both sides. You had this really stunning surge by Bernie Sanders, the way he was able to galvanize millennials, the way he was able to galvanize people for a more left vision, a society that was driven by more socialist type policies than we've ever really seen before in America. On the right, obviously, you had a Trump movement with policies that are, in fact, anathema to much of his own party's establishment. And she did not capitalize on that surging popular wave in how she framed her message.
And how does Trump, given everything you've said, Megyn, how does Trump synthesize this popular republicanism with the lesser, but it's diminished, but it's still powerful, the brand that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are espousing?
This is what we're going to be watching for even today, because he's meeting with Paul Ryan today, and how he sort of joins this up. Now, there's one very easy way, which is what he's largely going to look at Paul Ryan's playbook when he puts forward some of his most crucial economic policies. We're talking about tax reform. We talked a lot about infrastructure spending, how that's going to happen. Talk a lot about how he's going to boost jobs growth. Those types of things are straight out of the Republican establishment playbook. What is less out of the Republican establishment playbook is his views on trade, is his views on immigration and sort of how he'd secure the borders. These are things they're going to need to square up pretty fast. Because I think when you look at investors and you look at the markets and what they're most touchy about Donald Trump isn't so much his core economic framework outside of trade. It's his foreign policy and whether we're going to see this sort of putting a 50% tariffs on China, how we're going to deal with direct investment in Mexico. That does make the markets worry. So that's what we're going to have to get clarity on in the coming days and weeks.
Megyn, this internal election simulator that you talk about in the story, the battleground optimizer path to victory, does that continue to be his thermometer throughout his presidency? Will he continue to pacify and to help the people that voted for him, or does that get thrown out now?
He has built a data machine, and they spent a lot of money building this data machine, and it will be important for him to harness to see the impact of the kinds of things he's announcing. I mean, we have a president now coming in with essentially a policy blank slate. He's made a ton of promises and said things he's going to do, but he's also shown an incredible willingness to be flexible and pivot if he thinks something is more popular or, in fact, will work better. He will be able to use that data machine if he chooses to sort of road test those policies with people. But I think what is exciting for some people about a Donald Trump presidency in terms of policy people in the Republican Party is he's pretty easily influenced and can be steered one way or in a direction or another in terms of what they think is really going to achieve their goals. And Republicans have been waiting for years now, 8 years now, to road test some of these core economic policies, particularly on tax reform, particularly on repatriation of foreign income, particularly on what they can get done with Social Security, overhauling health care again. And that's what they're really going to be pushing for.